Welcome to Estate Planning Weekly. I'm your host, Bill Gross, at Bill Gross Probate on social media. We get together every week and talk with professionals in the estate planning space to learn how to be more productive with our customers and how to find new services and such to help us do our jobs more effectively. We're excited to have somebody we've had on before who we actually met through the Executorium podcast on the Executorium website. And a person who's going to explain to us, among other things, what a death doula is. Marni Blanks, thank you. Begin with the end. Marni, thank you for joining us today.
Nice to see you, Bill.
So I'm going to hold the death doula as a tease. Begin with the end. Now, there's famous Stephen Covey or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. So talk about, that's the title of your website. That's the top left slogan. How does that describe what you do?
Yeah, well, a lot of what I do is talking about and educating people on death, dying, and grief. And it's this overarching sort of category of topics that we as a society don't really talk about. And it's really important to be thinking about. And once we think about the end, we can sort of plan our lives in a way to live more freely. When we take away the mystery of the end of our lives, whenever that may be, it really makes every day a little more sweeter, a little more precious, and maybe we make choices that we may otherwise put off because we realize how important every day is, without being too, brutal about it.
Well, the end can be the very end. The end can also be towards the end, right? So I got a positive level. I know my wife and I are blessed to have so far 2 grandkids. And, I don't think I gave a lot of thought to that when I was younger. I might have taken better care of my health. But since I think about them more often, I like to be around when they're now 3.5 and 1.5. I like to be around when they're 13 and 11. About 23, what might my life look like 20 years from now? Well, if I'm going to be there, I need to get on things now to make the experience. So sometimes it's the end, but also planning financially, health-wise, living situation-wise, near the end also. That you're not saying begin with the very end in mind, as in what's it like to be 6 feet under with a bunch of dirt on you. You really mean as well preparing for those end years to have them truly be golden rather than struggling as much as possible.
Definitely, aging is something that we all go through, God willing. And
What?
and to your point, like how can we age in the best health we can, with the best financial health we can? When we're thinking about these choices and our decisions and where we want to be in the future, we make better choices, or we get to feel empowered to make choices and decisions now that maybe we wouldn't have made otherwise. And so it is, thinking ahead, whatever that future may look like. And am I going in the right direction? If I, by the end of my life want to have written a bestseller book, well, am I practicing writing now? Am I, doing my morning pages of, how am I leading my life now so that I feel no regrets down the line?
So I know you have a whole range of services from before people passed and planning to the end. So let's kind of go through that. Number 1, you have virtual end of life planning. What does that look like?
So a lot of people, when they think about end of life or estate planning, they think about those legal documents, the healthcare proxy, the power of attorney, the will and the trust, and those are all very important. And what I have found is that a lot of people just don't know where to begin. They may know those words, but oftentimes they get stuck on making a choice or decision. Some will even go as far as getting that estate attorney. They'll get that questionnaire, they'll get stuck on something, and it won't get completed, or it will sit on their desk for years. And so part of what I do is help people stay accountable and really help think through those decisions and what that looks like, who are the right people for those roles, so that they're actually completing those documents. But beyond that, thinking about, what does aging look like? How can we facilitate conversations between parents and adult children? So we're figuring out roles and responsibilities, making sure that people are on the same page so that wishes are honored, but also there's no family dynamics that get in the way of going through these life changes with as much ease as possible. And then a lot of what I do is also thinking about legacy. How do you want to be remembered? What are you doing now? And what wisdom or intergenerational wisdom you want to be passing on as you continue to age. So all these things are really important. And the other major thing that I do is help people get organized digitally. This is something that a lot of people overlook. The average person has 240 online accounts. Well, where are those accounts? A lot of people can lose access to important financial accounts or life insurance policies, safe deposit boxes, if we're not keeping track of where everything is. And so helping people organize both physically and digitally is a big part of what I help people with in advance.
Well, and I imagine part of it is just having some, like you mentioned at the beginning, all those are things we all can do on our own. We all know we're supposed to do on our own, but having somebody to coach us through that, to help keep us accountable, to kind of remind us in a polite way, I imagine that would be really the value, or I should say, one of the primary pieces of the value that you're creating on the pre-planning side. It's just the
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, and being able to guide people to the right resources, like you said, it's not just legal, it's also financial. How are we thinking about, life insurance, long-term care insurance, planning for the future in our
Right.
retirement? If we want to leave a legacy in terms of a financial legacy, how are you planning for that or your children? And so how can we guide people through those resources and make sure that they're set up also with better, professionals that are holding their hand? It really is a holistic process.
I know then another service you offer, the next stage would be when somebody passes. So talk a little bit about what kind of service you offer for families in those circumstances.
So, are you talking about as a death doula or as an after loss?
Well, that was next. I was talking more after loss. My next question was going to be, I'm holding people on edge.
Sure, sure.
It's called a teaser.
Absolutely.
People are on the edge. What's a death doula? But don't ask that question yet. Let's go to when
I
somebody
won't.
passes, what after loss services look
Yeah.
like.
So when someone passes, there is a ton of paperwork and logistics that fall on families. It can be figuring out, where the credit card, accounts are, the other financial accounts, investment accounts, life insurance policies, unclaimed property, canceling subscriptions, transferring, everything to an estate account. There's all these little tasks that add up to a lot of time. And when you're in grief, it's really hard to be dealing with logistics. And when you're in logistics mode, it's really hard to be feeling your feelings and be in grief. So a lot of what I do is help create a roadmap of all of those tasks based on someone's individual circumstances and take as many of those tasks off their plate as possible. So whether it's doing the research and getting that right paperwork for them to sign, or physically sitting on the phone with the credit card company and negotiating down debt. It's a wide range of services, but really it's meant to create that space for the grieving family or executor to grieve.
And is this something you offer like an hourly basis, or is there a package deal, or how do people contract with you to do this?
Yeah, I typically work in package hours. It's usually depending about 5 to 10 hours of work. But if someone, there are some people that when they're in grief really feel it helpful to feel productive and they
Mm,
want to be doing those tasks.
mm,
And that can be cathartic for people. And so, in that sense, we can have a smaller engagement where I help create that roadmap and give it to them and sort of have an after ask me anything where they're getting stuck and sort of be that accountability person in the background, but allowing them to
mm.
sort of take the lead on those tasks.
Got it. Yeah, I see that. I can imagine my wife, when I'm gone, she wouldn't have everybody to nag, so she can call the credit companies and nag them, and the bank and nag them, the insurance. I'm kidding. She's not in the room here, so I can say real boldly, and she doesn't watch my podcast. So, okay. So, what is a death doula?
So, a death doula is a non medical professional who helps educate around death, dying, and grief. And so that can look like helping with advanced directives and advanced thinking through those health decisions and what's most important to you at the end. But it can actually be sitting bedside with a family member at the end and being a loving support. So sometimes I'll come in with someone has a healthcare diagnosis a year in advance, 6 months in advance, or it could be a few weeks in advance of someone passing. And how can I create as loving an experience and warm an experience at the end as I can? So that can look like emotional support. A lot of people, when they are dying or they've received a diagnosis, sort of go insular. They don't necessarily want to burden their family or their loved ones with fear or anxiety or sadness or resentment or anger. And so having someone who can sit and have uncomfortable conversations with them can be really cathartic to the person. It can also look like writing letters, helping a person write letters to family or loved ones if they're unable to do it for themselves anymore. But it could also be more practical. It can be going through their phone book. Everyone, if you look at my phone, there's probably 300 contacts, but who are those important contacts that should be contacted after? It could also be helping get resources, creating a meal train for the family so that they can just be with their loved one instead of having to figure that part out. Or just getting other resources in. And it can also just be respite care, sitting with the person who is dying so that whoever's taking care of them can take that shower, can take a walk, can go to a yoga class, or whatever they need to do to be taking care of themselves during this process. It really is a very personal experience for each individual. Some want it to be more emotional, some want it to be more practical. But just as there are birth doulas to help people sort of enter this world and advocate for the parent who's giving birth, so does a death doula on the other side. How can we advocate so that your wishes are respected at the end and that you get as good a death as you can and whatever that looks like for you?
It's interesting. Literally, my favorite uncle passed late Monday night, and my aunt called me yesterday to tell me. And a couple things come to mind about the needs. It's a shame they didn't have some help. We went to Las Vegas. We went to go see them on purpose, and they were very self-conscious and didn't want us to even visit them. I didn't have the opportunity. I'm literally here waiting any minute to be told about funeral arrangements. I'd like to go and attend and honor my uncle. Yet I want to bother my aunt because I'm sure she's overwhelmed with what she's dealing with. And so if there was somebody else, they would either be calling me and or give me the contact information or vice versa. I can see the benefit of that. Personally, I'm experiencing it. I'd like to really go to, in this case, it's Las Vegas. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive each way. Or airplane trip, either one, I would do it. I just don't know when, and can't do it if I don't, have the time slot to make it work, unfortunately. So
It's a really good point that, in that moment, at the very end or right after the end, the family is, or, the loved ones. When I say family, I mean either chosen family or biological family, because a lot of people are solo aging and rely on chosen family, or people, can have all different kinds of family dynamics. So when I say family, I mean all encompassing loved ones. But a lot of people in that position are completely overwhelmed with decision fatigue,
yes,
with having to answer those calls, and
yeah,
having someone who can help them. For one client, we helped pre-plan the funeral and prepay for the funeral so that, that wasn't on the family to figure out after the death. It was all figured out already. But I was also the point person for everyone.
right.
I was the one who made a lot of those calls, who gave the information on when the funeral would be, when people had questions. I was the person who was fielding them so that the family could, have a little bit of space, who could, make sure that they were doing what they needed to do to get through that situation. And they knew that it was all being taken care of. So it really is, it's so hard. And a lot of people are in a brain fog during that
Right.
time. And they
Right.
might not be intending to not remind you of when the funeral is. In fact, personally, my great aunt, she lived to 102 and a half.
Wow.
She just died last month, and the
Oh,
funeral is this week. She lived a long, beautiful life. But to your point, my aunt wasn't told the memorial arrangements, and it's not because she wasn't invited, but the family, my cousins and their family, just didn't remember to tell her. This happens all the time, and not because they don't want you there. It's just
right.
sometimes people forget.
And a day or two sooner notice makes it easier to make arrangements, to clear your schedule or to book a flight or whatever it is. I know in my uncle's case, he has family on the East Coast that, will not be able to make it based on the date, the time, and flights and schedules and all that stuff. And so, it
Yeah.
seems, we have personal productivity in our business, and it's not like I have to go for me. I want to honor my uncle, and I know he would love to have his brother there. He'd love to have, other important people in his life to honor him, and having somebody I could see the value of having somebody besides my aunt, who, by the way, she's been bedridden with pain and problems of her own, to
Yeah.
be the point person, or my cousins who are just lost their father. Rather than having been that person, and I'm pretty stoic. I've lost both my parents, and my wife's lost both her parents. I've been through this 4 times. We all have different personalities. Mine just kind of lines up better to handle these things. But I can imagine my cousins. I don't want to call them. I do, but I also want to be respectful and give them some space and wait for them to reach out. So it's hard. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's a death deal. Wow, there's a lot to go on there. I'm going to get off that because that's uncomfortable for me. I'm sorry. I'm all kinds of stuff going on with that. Talk about legacy work.
Yeah, it really comes down to how do you want to be remembered? So a lot of people, have all of this institutional wisdom, generational knowledge that how can we pass that down? For a lot of elders, that means, can we capture their life stories and life histories on audio? I found that many elders don't want themselves on video at
Yes.
that stage, but how can we, set it up, and a lot of people don't necessarily want to share those stories with family member. You have the family stories that everyone knows, but sometimes asking different questions get different answers. But it can be helpful to have an outside person asking those questions, getting it out of them, and then sharing it with the family when they're comfortable sharing it. So that's one way. It can be anything from creating, your favorite playlist to play at your funeral that is meaningful to you. It can be a
Yeah.
collage of images, of photos, or, creating a recipe book of the family's favorite recipes to pass on to the generations, whether it's, photos of those, the note cards that have all of the smudges on it and really, thinking about it that way, or in fact, capturing the video of, the family making those meals together and doing it that way. There's so many ways. With some families, we've created legacy quilts of, important fabrics or, old shirts or textiles, and creating a legacy quilt out of them. I
Wow.
worked with a
Wow.
family that the mother who passed had about 100 silk scarves, and the daughter, we created a quilt out of all of these beautiful silk scarves.
Wow.
Um,
So
yeah.
I know one of the resources that you offer is your Plan Well Organizer. Talk about that a little bit. What's the Plan Well Organizer? What's behind that? And what would somebody who gets that, what would the purpose be, and how does that help them?
So the Plan All Organizer was birthed out of my desire for my parents to get organized. A little background on me is that I got into this work because I got a call from a hospital in another state. I'm in New York. It was in Massachusetts, that my mother had been in a freak car accident. And, having to become a caregiver when I had a full-time business of my own was incredibly stressful. And luckily, not only did she survive, but while she was at the hospital, she was well enough to help me get into those accounts that I needed to access to make sure that I was caring for her. But had she died in that moment, or had she been incapacitated, I would have been completely lost. And so I created this workbook of all of that important information that usually lives in our heads, or it's, if you're in a partnership, sometimes one family member will, be in charge of the utility bills and in that, and the other person will be in charge of the finances. So how can we collect all of the important information into one safe and secure space? So I created this organizer, which is really robust, getting all that information down. And then you can either upload it to a digital vault if you have, that. You could print it out and keep it with all of your other important documents. But it's really a way in which to make sure all of that information can be accessed when the time comes or when it's needed.
Well, Marni, thank you so much for sharing. Marni Blank, you can get more information, beginwiththeend.co.co. And if you go there to the website, you'll see in the top, if you're interested in the Plan Well organizer on the top, you just click on that and that'll bring you to the page where you can order a copy of that if that's what you want to do, as well as her phone number on there. Marni, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Always learn something, a little more maybe than I want to on some topics, but helpful and educational and helping make those uncomfortable conversations a little more comfortable with a smile. So thank you so much for your time today, as always.
Thank you so much, Bill, for having me. I appreciate it.
And for the rest of you, this is the Estate Planning Weekly website, our podcast. We get together every week and have a new episode of professionals in the field to help us be more effective with our business, whether it be an estate planner or a vendor that supports us along the way. You can continue the conversation on our Facebook group. The Estate Planning Podcast is a Facebook group on Facebook. Put your comments there, questions, as well as if you're looking for referrals, looking for people in different states and such, you can participate there. As always, if I can help, please reach out. Bill Gross at Bill Gross Probate on social media. Call, text, or email. And as always, make today your best day ever. Thank you.